Please go ahead and be seated. Okay. We left off, if I'm not mistaken, we kind of finished up around page 61 and 62. We got through last class. We got through all of the confusion that the Jewish astrologers and the rabbis and the rabbs and all of them, all of the things that they did in trying to calculate when to keep the feast. You know, instead of simply obeying the law, Yahweh's laws, statutes, commandments, and judgments, they came up with a better way. So they thought to keep the feast, so they wouldn't have to actually go out and be obedient to what Yahweh instructs us to do. And we left off, like I said, around page 60, 61, and I just want you to kind of remember here some of the things that we went through last week, and I want to kind of hit just a real brief review of that. Remember that the scripture tells us of a conspiracy. I'll try that one more down there. The conspiracy, and that conspiracy basically amounts to confusion. It amounts to Babylon. And you remember, Babylon is it's not a city. It's not just a city, but it's a complete system. It's a system of confusion. And we saw the example of that last week when, with all of the things and all of these calculations that they were trying to come up with to try and create a new and better way. And it bred confusion. I mean, remember, they couldn't even decide among themselves the right way to interpret and to do what they were trying to do themselves. You know, it was, you know, it's something. It is nothing other than Babylon, other than that confusion. But the scriptures prophesy, and they showed us. Jeremiah tells us that they walked in obedience to the imagination and the stubbornness of their own hearts, and that there was a conspiracy there in verse 9 that is found among the men of Yada and among the inhabitants of Jerusalem. And remember what they did. They turned back to the iniquities of their forefathers, and they refused to listen to the laws of Yahweh. And we see that example with them trying to, again, you know, find that way. But they've gone after the hinder gods to go after and to serve them. And Yeketskiah speaks also of that conspiracy again. There is a conspiracy in of her prophets in her midst. Her priests have violated my law, and they have profaned my holy things. Remember, it's Yahweh's Sabbath days and his feast days. They are holy. And these rabbis, these rabbs, the people who have tried to come up with this new way, they've profaned those holy things. See, they've profaned those holy things. They violated my laws, they profaned the holy things, and they've put no difference between the holy and the profane. They're trying to, as a great Kahan that spoke before in the classes before, and you have to remember what they were doing. They're trying to reconcile a lunar calendar and a solar calendar. They're trying to merge the two, and there's no way that you can. It can't be done. Yahweh doesn't say anything about keeping the feast days according to anything as far as the solar calendar is concerned for setting the days and the seasons or anything like that. It's all based on lunar. It's based on the sighting of the green ears of barley and the physical observances of the new moons. And continuing on there, you see there it says they've made no difference between the holy and the profane. They're teaching that they're one and the same. They're mixing the two. They've not taught the difference between the clean and the unclean, and they've shut their eyes to the keeping of my Sabbaths, and I'm profaned among them. Yes, they've shut their eyes to that, remember? They've shut their eyes to it. They don't seek, they don't look for the things that Yahweh tells them to look for. Okay, continuing on. In her prophets, they've covered these deeds with whitewash, seeing false visions and divining lies, saying, this is what Father Yahweh says, but Yahweh has not spoken. And see, they're passing these things off as this is what Yahweh says. This is how Yahweh tells us to keep these things. And that's scriptural lie. All you have to do, one has to do, is read in the law and compare what they're being taught to what's written in the law. And you're going to see that there's no commonality there at all. Okay, continuing on to the next one, in 2 Corinthians 11. Remember this, but I fear that by any means, as a serpent subtly deceived Eve with her craftiness, so your minds may be corrupted and led away astray from the simplicity that is in the Messiah. Remember, the Yahweh's laws are simple. There's nothing complicated about them. And we saw the complications that they created. And we're going to kind of continue today. We're going to continue in what these Jewish astronomers and astrologers say in some specific scriptures about what they say, and then Pastor answers those things scripturally to show the correct way that it should be done. Okay, so and that's that warning. And then their ultimate goal, remember, is to take Yahweh completely out of the picture. They don't want that obedience. And we see how that they do that. They unlearn and they're unstable, and they twist the scriptures to their own destruction. That is the only thing that they can do. That's what they do. They twist the scriptures to make them say what they want. Remember, behold, the lying pen of the scribes has falsified them and written them wrong. There's all different kinds of ways that they can twist these things around. But if we pick up here, I think I left off on page 61, 62, but we'll pick up here in Exodus 34:22. On page 61 of the new book. I'm not sure what page it is in the old. But it says in Exodus 34:22, in the King James Version, it says, "You shall observe the Feast of Weeks and the first fruits of the wheat harvest, and the Feast of Ingathering at the year's end." Pastor shows here the word translated end is the Hebrew word tekufah. And what the deceived assemblies who teach the vernal equinox want you to believe is that the word end means autumn equinox. They want you to say it means the last, it means it's that last equinox of the season. And notice where they get this from. It's written in the Babylonian Talmud, tells us what they mean by the word season. And look at the underlined part. The underlined part here, it says the duration of a season of the year is no longer than 91 days and 7.5 hours. And the beginning of one season is removed from that of the other by no more than 1/2 of a planetary hour. Okay, so that's part of that confusion in there, that they're trying to show how smart they are in getting these calculations out, but they're not smarter than Yahweh. And Pastor shows, he says, what these deceived assemblies who are following the astrologers and astronomers want you to believe is that Yahweh's seasons are the same as their sun's seasons. See, they're trying to reconcile. They're trying to merge those two and say one is, and I'm going to use their words, one is just as good as the other. Or, the solar is actually better because it's more accurate. No, it's not more accurate. Yahweh's way is the way it is to be done. But then it shows here that a duration of no longer than 91 days, 7.5 hours between one equinox to the next solstice, and from that solstice to the next equinox. Okay? And then on page 62 there it says, what these deceived assemblies who are following the astrologers and astronomers want you to believe is that all you have to do is just set the very next new moon after the vernal equinox as the first moon of the year. Then naturally the Feast of Tabernacles would fall in the astrological Tekufah equinox season of Tishri. And Pastor hits the nail on the head here, and he says what they're actually saying is, don't even bother about obeying Yahweh. What did the Pope come out and say here? It seems to me like it was just a few weeks ago, but it's been probably a year and a half to 2 years. Remember what he said? He said, don't turn everything into something so legalistic. They're trying to break salvation down into something legalistic instead of it being by grace. It was something along that lines is what he said. But remember, it's about obedience. So there's no difference here with what they were saying as to what the Pope was saying. It's the same message. It's the same message. It says what they are saying is don't even bother about obeying Yahweh. Don't even bother about watching for the green ears of barley to set Yahweh's appointed feast. Don't even bother about Yahweh. You see, they're pushing. You can see in their actions, they're pushing Yahweh. They're trying to push Yahweh out of the picture. Don't even bother about Yahweh. And Pastor warns, he says, beware of this trap. Beware of it and stay away from it. Because remember the strictness with which Yahweh tells us to set his feasts. And when they are set according to the way that Yahweh tells us, remember those are Yahweh's feasts. What makes them Yahweh's feasts? Remember? It's because they were set in the manner and the order in which Yahweh said to set them. It was done His way. That's His feast. I want it done this way. That's the feast days Yahweh's way. But when it is set by the Son, by the way that Yahweh doesn't set, by the way He doesn't instruct us to, remember what Romans 6:16 says. You belong to whom you obey. If you're not obeying Yahweh in the way that the feasts are set, who are we following? Praise Yahweh. Satan. So then whose feasts do those become? Praise Yahweh. Okay? So you see the importance of doing exactly what Yahweh instructs us to do. Okay. Exodus 34:22 scripturally says, Exodus 34:22 out of the book of Yahweh says that you shall observe the Feast of Weeks with the first fruits of the harvest, and the Feast of an Ingathering during the feast circuit, their Tekufah, at the end of Yahweh's sacred year in the fall. Now, in Exodus 34:22 out of the King James Version, it says, you shall observe the Feast of Weeks, the first fruits of the wheat harvest, and the Feast of Ingathering at year's end. You know, Pastor shows here, he shows in the Pentateuch and Haftorahs by Hertz on page 367, shows the word translated year end in the King James Version is translated at the turn of the year. So at the turn of the year in the Hebrew Bible, which means at the turn of the year. The year being reckoned according to the agricultural seasons, the gathering of the harvest marks its end. Okay, so you see that Yahweh's sacred year is based around that harvest season. It's based around that harvest year. It says, Yahweh's Tekufah, or Yahweh's sacred year, is from the beginning to end of His appointed times. Yahweh's spiritual year begins and ends when He calls His people together for His set feasts at His set times. This is the Tekufah of Yahweh's sacred year. Okay? So Yahweh's spiritual year begins and ends when He calls His people together. Remember what He tells us the beginnings of the year is. The beginnings of the year. And I'm getting ahead of myself, but that's down here in Exodus chapter 20, verses 1 through 2, or 12, verses 1 through 2. But Exodus 13:10 there, Yahweh tells us as, you shall therefore keep this ordinance in its season from year to year. And then in the Pentateuch and Haftorahs by Hertz on page 262 tells us that this ordinance of the Passover in its season or in its appointed time at the full moon, it says at the full moon in the month of Nisan from year to year, literally from days to days. And the word translated year in Exodus 13:10 is that word number 3117 in Strong's, and it means in the required season, in the required season. And if you look, let me see here. Yeah, there's the word required. Required means stipulated as necessary to be done. Okay, in the required season, Yahweh stipulates through His laws and through His statutes on how these are to be ascertained. So it's in that required, or in that as stipulated as necessary to be done, made, or provided. Okay, Exodus 13:10 means that Yahweh's people will begin Yahweh's feast at the appointed time of the season of the new moon of green ears of barley on Yahweh's Passover on the 15th day of this moon, which is the beginning of Yahweh's sacred year in the spring. The beginning count of Yahweh's year is found in Exodus 12, 1 through 2. And Yahweh said to Moshe and Aaron in the land of Egypt, this moon shall be unto you the beginning of the moons, and it shall be the first moon of you, the first moon of the year to you. So, He gives us no uncertain terms of when that beginning is. The new moon of the green ears of barley is the first moon of the year to us. The word translated year in Exodus 12:2 is word number 8141 in Strong's, and it means a year as a revolution of time. And again, going back to the Pentateuch and Haftorahs by Hirsch on page 253 and 254, on this Exodus 12:2, he has shown here the beginning of months. The first month of your freedom shall be made in the first reckoning of the months, so that you reckon your time from the hour of freedom. And it says that Exodus was marked in the beginning of a new era, and not only in the years in the national history. says Israel is now given a new calendar, thus making a break with Egypt, with Egypt complete. Now you see what was said there. Israel is now given a new calendar. It says they were given a new calendar, thus making a break. Look what the significance of doing this is, of setting the feast days according to the way that Yahweh says. It's making a break, making that separation, coming out from among them and being separate, says Yahweh, from Egypt, making that complete. And remember what Egypt represents, right? Praise Yahweh. Egypt represents sin. So this is making sure that this is what is, this is being done. And this is the same reason that the calendar has been reestablished and is being done again in these last days, is to get the names of these gods out of our mouths, to get this idea of basing everything on the sun for setting the feast days and setting the time, not setting the feast days, but for keeping track of time, for keeping track of the days, for keeping track of the years. We're doing it Yahweh's way, the way Yahweh instructs us to be doing it. So in the biblical and early Talmudic times, it shows here, the Sanhedrin fixed the new moons by actual observation. Look, it was done by actual observation. The way it was supposed to be done, it was done that. And the dates were announced by messengers from Jerusalem to the surrounding countries. Later, when they developed these new things, the dates were determined by astronomical calculation. See, they allowed that God worship to creep in. The revolution of time we are to begin is the feast circuit of Yahweh's sacred year. That revolution of time we are to begin is the feast circuit of Yahweh's sacred year, which begins with the sighting of the green ears of barley, and then the first new moon after that has been sighted, which is coming up rather quickly upon us now. In fact, a fact you must also be aware of is the fact that Moshe and Aaron were still in Egypt when Yahweh spoke to them in Exodus 12, 1 through 2. And again, it shows down here in the Pentateuch and Haftorahs on page 253 that this month, the month of Abib or Nisan, in which the deliverance was about to take place. Now, deliverance from Egypt was about to take place in the season when the barley was in the green ear in Egypt. If one were in Egypt, in the area of Goshen, as the children of Israel were when Yahweh appointed this ordinance, one would have seen the green ears of barley. Notice when it was. In late first Roman month or early second Roman month. The Pentateuch and Haftorahs, page 244, states emphatically what time the year of barley were struck down in Exodus 9:31. And then you see here, it says the flax and barley were smitten. The time indicated is the end of the first Roman month or the beginning of the second Roman month. And the flax was much esteemed by the Egyptians, and Egypt was the great linen market of the ancient world. And the barley was used for making a coarse bread that was eaten by the poor. But the point that they're showing here is that the time when the barley was in the green ear. End of first Roman month, beginning of second Roman month. And Pastor shows here, he says, please note this fact. The first and second Roman months are not even close to the vernal equinox, which the astrologers and astronomers and deceived assemblies are embracing. Not even close. Yahweh was not speaking of an astrological or astronomical occurrence at all. Yahweh was establishing the season his feast must begin in. The season when the barley is in the green ear. Yahweh did not establish a season of a vernal equinox in Egypt then, nor has he today. Remember, I am Yahweh, I change not. He didn't change it up on us. He didn't switch it around. He didn't change his mind from the beginning and have these old laws, have the so-called old laws that everybody wants to try to rationalize and justify away. He hasn't changed. It's still simply done the same way he said to do it in the beginning. It hasn't changed, and it won't change. The children of Israel sacrificed the Passover over lambs in Egypt when the barley was in the green ear, and Yahweh also instructed the children of Israel to keep this service when they come into the land of Israel, when the barley is in the green ear. In Exodus 13, verses 4 through 5, and on this day you came out in the moon of Abib, the moon of the green ears of barley. When Yahweh brings you into the land of the Canaanites, and the Hittites, and the Amorites, and the Hivites, and the Jebusites, which he swore to your fathers to give you, a land flowing with milk and honey, you are to observe this ceremony in this moon. See, you're to continue to observe it in the way that he stated, in the moon in which he said. The green ears, or the ears of grain, ripen at different times in different parts of the world, and the grain definitely ripens later in Israel than it does in Egypt. But Yahweh's ordinances are established. And remember, we covered this last time. I think last time, it might have been a few classes back, but we're going to go over it again here just briefly. But we can refer back to it later if we need to. But Yahweh's ordinances is established. We're to watch for the new moon of green ears of barley on Mount Zion in Jerusalem, and then observe Yahweh's Passover. And we've got to remember, that Mount Zion. What is this Mount Zion? Where is it? And where is this Jerusalem? Is it all the way back over there in the Middle East? No. Remember, Isaiah chapter 2, verse 3 shows it will come to pass in the last days that the mountain or the promotion of the house of Yahweh will be established in the chief of the nations. And then in the latter part there of verse 3, for the law will depart from Zion, and the word of Yahweh will depart from Jerusalem. Remember, it was no longer taught there. Look at the next one down. Look at Yachanan 4:21. And Yahshua said to her, Woman, believe me, the hour comes when you will worship the Father neither on this mountain nor in Jerusalem. And we've got to go back to what Pastor shows us here in the 16th book of Yisrayl, chapter 5. And it tells us about this Mount Zion. It says that Mount Zion was originally Mount Moriah, and it came to be known because of Yahweh's house. That's why it was known. It was known because Yahweh's house was there. It came to be known as those who lift up holy hands to Yahweh. That word is Zion. The Hebrew word Zion means those who lift up and keep the 613 laws. Well, where is it that the 613 laws are taught today and kept and upheld today? It's right here. And it was established and it was reestablished according to the prophecies. It had to be reestablished because the house of Yahweh was wiped out and it was taken out of existence for almost 1900 years, the prophet showed. So that word Zion, that word Zion, the Hebrew word Zion, means those who lift up and keep the 613 laws. This is counted as merit to one who does them, and that's how come they changed the name from Moriah. It came to be known as Zion from Yahweh's people, and it came to refer to Yahweh's people. And then this Mount Zion in Jerusalem, remember what the Great Kahan has told us and shown us from the authoritative books on multiple occasions what Jerusalem means. Jerusalem means it's a compound word, and it means a priest who teaches or instructs to keep peace at Abel. So it is referring to the reestablished house of Yahweh in these last days. This is where that these green ears have to be sighted, because it's not being done over in the Middle East any longer. Yahweh has not chosen that. He has not established his house there. It was reestablished here, according to prophecy, by the two witnesses, all according to prophecy. Okay, I've got to remember that, because people will try to get in and they will try to, well, Yahweh's people are everywhere. It doesn't matter. It most certainly does. Because if they speak not according to the law and to the prophets, it's because there's no light in them. We have to remember that. You've got to remember that Satan walks about like a roaring lion, seeking whom she may devour. And we read the warnings earlier about the subtlety and the craftiness of the adversary. We have to keep these things in mind, because they may sound right. It may sound right. It may sound correct. But does it stand up against what's written in the law and the prophets? But Yahweh is the creator. So It says Yahweh's new moon of green ears of barley can be and sometimes is observed before the vernal equinox. In fact, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if it's before the vernal equinox. It doesn't matter. The equinox, the sun doesn't play any part in it. It's all set according to the conditions that Yahweh himself brings about. Yahweh is the creator of the sun. He also created the earth and the weather patterns upon the earth. Therefore, it is Yahweh who brings on the weather patterns that bring on the green ears in the springtime, at the very time that Yahweh wants them to appear, whether earlier in the spring or later in the spring. Yahweh is in complete control. They are his feasts. He is going to lead, guide, and direct when he wants his feasts to be observed. And the only way we can know that is by paying attention to the things that Yahweh tells us to look for. Okay, but the 365 Days, the Story of Our Calendar by Keith G. Irvin on 1963, they confirms the springtime is not completely steady nor free from year-to-year variations. And we can attest to that. And we'll see it here in just a second. But it shows, but the advance of springtime, that is the time when the living things, stimulated by the increasing warmth, burst into increased activity, is neither completely steady nor free from year-to-year variations. Thus, the sun's position on such a spring day as 4th Roman month, first day, can be predicted with full accuracy long before the event. But the top temperature that will be reached that day, the nest building progress of the birds, the leaf sizes of the oaks, and all of the other responses of life to springtime can never be subject to an accurate prediction. Okay? The temperature chart of springtime, the sun is not directly responsible for the variations in temperature that occur on the same calendar date of different years. And I was trying to see if I could find a larger picture of this, but I wasn't able to in the time that I had. But if you take a look here, it's in the new book, it's on page 66, but it shows the average temperature for 30 years. And you can see it there. It covers the 2nd Roman month through the 5th Roman month. And you see on that top one is an average. And you see that it's a normal line. It's just it's a steady increase. Now, if the sun was directly responsible for that temperature, then on today's date, then exactly 1 year ago on today's date, the temperature should have been exactly as it is right now. But I'll bet if you look back, I'll bet it wasn't. I bet it was probably warmer. It might have been colder. I don't know. I didn't look. But you can see the variations. Look at the temperature variations for those months. And you can see how they vary. They go up and down, up and down, up and down. And it varies over that whole time period. And the whole reason behind that is what's written at the top of the next page over here. It says, Yahweh controls the weather that brings on or delays the green ears of barley in the springtime. Yahweh's in control. Yahweh is in control of these things. The word year in Exodus 12:2 is word number 8141, Shana, a year as a revolution of time, which comes from word 8138, which means to fold, to duplicate, to do a second time. So Yahweh's Tekufah, Yahweh's series of feasts within his sacred year, begins in the moon in which the barley is in the green ear. Okay, in Exodus 9:31 and Exodus 12:12, the barley was in the green ear. This moon is the beginning of moon. Now notice here, it says Yahweh's feasts will be done every year. They're duplicated. And Yahweh's Tekufah and Yahweh's cycle of feasts and Yahweh's feast cycle from the Passover through the last great day. That is Yahweh's Tekufah. That is the sacred year. That is the year Yahweh's way. Exodus 34:22 is not scripturally speaking of an equinox. It is telling Yahweh's people that they are to keep his Feast of Weeks, or Pentecost, 50 days after the first holy convocation of Passover, and his Feast of Ingathering at the end of his sacred year within this feast circuit, this Tekufah. And then when the next new moon of green ears is sighted the following spring, the sequence of events the sequence of Yahweh's feast begins again. It is duplicated. It is repeated. Okay? So it has absolutely nothing to do with the solstices at all. Okay? So that was Exodus 34:22 scripturally and by the Jewish astronomers or astrologers. Now here's another one that they'll use. It's 1 Samuel chapter 1 and verse 20. By the Jewish astrologers or astronomers. I don't like how these sections are getting smaller. Those are getting smaller, but the scriptural explanations are much longer than the confusion that they put in. But in 1 Samuel chapter 1 verse 20, wherefore it came to pass when the time was come about, after Hannah had conceived, she bore a son, and then called his name Samuel, because I have asked him of Yahweh. In 1 Samuel chapter 1 verse 20, the word Tekupha has been translated in the King James Version as, when the time was come about. The assemblies who preach about the equinoxes and solstices, notice they don't have any comment whatsoever about 1 Samuel chapter 20. 1 Samuel chapter 1 verse 20. They don't say anything about it, except for the fact that the word Tekupha is in the scripture. That's the only thing they say. Why? Well, it's only after one researches what the Jewish astronomers and astrologers teach about this scripture that one realizes why the assemblies remain silent about it. The Babylonian Talmud on page 273 tells us, and it gives something here about the in item number 5 here. It talks about an incomplete number of months. Number 7 there shows the year is divided in 4 cycles, or 4 Tekupha, each consisting of 3 months. And it shows that this represents no less than 2, hence 6 months. And then what they're trying to show here is the text is speaking of Hannah's conception, and the birth of Samuel implies that a viable child may be born after a pregnancy of 6 months and 2 days. Okay, we'll see what they're trying to say here. The further information comes from the Trekate Rosh Hashanah on page 41, which proves the astrologers and astronomers think that Samuel's mother gave birth to a very premature baby. Okay, so that's what they're saying. They're saying about that scripture. Well, since the Tekupha is only 3 months, then it was 2 of those. So that's 6 months. So he must have been born premature. And that's what they're saying about that scripture. But he continues here, and it says, because it shows here that she was only pregnant for 2 Tekufot. In other words, the prophet Samuel was born 6 months and 2 days after he was conceived. And then you see down here what Pastor shows here in 1 Samuel 20. It says, EV, when the time was come about. This is taken as proof by the Talmud that Hannah bore him after 6 months and 2 days. Notice where they got their proof from. They got it from the Talmud from Babylon, which is utter confusion. They got the proof from their own writings. Okay, they tried to prove it from their own writings. And I think, as Pastor would put, that's kind of like letting the fox watch the hen house, or something along that lines, maybe something along that way. But that's what it is. They tried to prove it through their own writings. Now, 1 Samuel chapter 1. Verse 20 scripturally, and then Pastor shows here, it says, wherefore it came to pass when the time was come about after Hannah had conceived that she bore a son and called his name Samuel, because I have asked him of Yahweh. Properly translated in the book of Yahweh, it reads in 1 Samuel 1 verse 20, so after Hannah conceived she bore a son during Yahweh's sacred year, Tekupha, and called his name Samuel, for she said, because I asked Yahweh for him. The Pentateuch and Haftorah confirms the fact that this phrase, when the time was come about, that should have been translated feast circuit. Then you can see here, when the time was come about, look at the underlined part there that Pastor has for us. It says that the phrase is better understood as at the coming around of the new year, that is, at the next season for Elkanah's annual pilgrimage. And Pastor shows, because the word Tekupha means feast circuit, or more properly, Yahweh's sacred year, 1 Samuel chapter 1 verse 20 is merely telling us when Samuel was born. It's just given the time of the year that when Samuel was born. He was born sometime during Yahweh's sacred year. not that he was a premature baby. Okay, you see the confusion. You see how they get way off on these things. In 2 Chronicles chapter 24, verse 23, by the Jewish astrologers and astronomers. In the King James Version, it reads here, it says, "And it came to pass at the end of the year that the host of Syria came up against him, and they came to Judah and Jerusalem, and destroyed all the princes of the people from among the people, and sent all the spoil of them unto the king of Damascus." The word Tekupha in 2 Chronicles chapter 24, verse 23 has been translated at the end of the year in the King James Version. The assemblies and the Jewish astrologers or astronomers who preach the equinoxes and solstices to you say that there are two scriptures that show the word Tekupha mean a calendar year. It's at Exodus 34:22, which we've already read, and 2 Chronicles chapter 24, verse 23 is the other. However, the only comment that they have made about 2 Chronicles chapter 24, verse 23 is at the year's end. And then they have in Tekupha or Nisan or of Tishri is one of the equinoxes. From what we do know, Pastor says, is this. When these deceived assemblies speak of Tekupha, they're speaking of sun worship. They're speaking of setting everything by the sacred pole, by the sun. That's what they're speaking of. Now, scripturally, this same verse here shows here, it says, "And it came to pass in the end of the year that the host of Syria came up against him, and they came to Judah and Jerusalem, and destroyed all the princes of the people from among the people, and sent the spoil of them into the king of Damascus." And then from the Cambridge Bible, is displayed. 2 Chronicles 24:23 is displayed, which shows the center reference that the phrase "end of the year," which is the word Tekupha, means the revolution of the year. And so you see that center reference here. Pastors referred to these center reference versions, quite a bit. And there in verse 23, you can see that it says, "And it came to pass at the end of the year." Well, you see that number 3 there. Look to the left, and you can see what it is in that center reference there. Is in Hebrew, in the revolution of the year. And then the Anchor Bible shows that this phrase, "end of the year," should have been translated at the turn of the year during Yahweh's feast, and it was springtime, not fall. And then we can see that here in the copy that's right below that, the turn of the year, there at 23, in the spring of the year. And Pastor shows us here, he says, the book of the Chronicles are merely historical documents. They're merely historical documents giving an account of the history of the nation of Israel. That's what it is. They're historical counts. In this scripture, notice this, in this scripture, no utterance at all is made concerning Yahweh, Yahweh's laws, nor of Yahweh's prophecies, and as we well know, no utterances about the equinox. Properly translated in the book of Yahweh, that first part there we see, "And it came to pass during the feast circuit," or the Tekupha, in the spring. And it says all 2 Chronicles chapter 24, verse 23 is saying is that this army came and attacked Judah and Jerusalem during Yahweh's sacred year when he had ordained his feast. Again, it was a time period, the time of the year when this event took place, just like it was back over here with the birth of Samuel. Okay? The same type of thing. It was just referencing a time of year. Psalm 19:6. Psalm 19:6. By Jewish astrologers, astronomers. In Psalm 19:6, it says, in the King James Version, "His going forth is from the end of heaven, and his circuit unto the ends of it. There is nothing hid from the heat thereof." And Pastor shows here the word Tekupha has been translated circuit in Psalm 19:6. The astrologers, astronomers, and deceived assemblies will try to tell you this word circuit should be solstice. And they translate this scripture as follows. Okay, so they translate it as follows. The sun goes forth from the end of the heavens at sunrise, and it's the sun's circuit, Tekupha, or solstice, on their heaven's end. Okay, so you can see how they throw that in there. They slip that. They kind of slip it in there, kind of like they do with some italicized words. If you're not careful, those italicized words can slip you up, especially when you're dealing with the King James Version for sure. It says they erroneously attribute this circuit to be that of the sun, because the word sun is written in Psalm 19:4 in the King James Version. In effect, the astronomers, astrologers, and deceived assemblies hold on to this mistranslated scripture in Psalm 19:4 through 6 while rejecting Psalm 19:1 through 3. Let's see if I have that one here. Oh, maybe not. Is it going to... Okay, we'll just do it this way. Ha. Okay. So look what they do. The astronomers, they hold on to these mistranslated scriptures, and we're given a warning. In Jeremiah chapter 8, verse 8, how can you say that we are the wise and the law of Yahweh is with us? Behold, the lying pen of the scribes has falsified them and written them wrong. And this is what the assemblies are doing. They're taking hold of these writings that have been mistranslated, and they're holding on to that mistranslation. They don't want to let it go because they don't want to let it go. They want to hang on to their traditions. They don't want to be obedient, is the bottom line. But they hold on. They hold on to that mistranslated scripture, Psalm 19:4 through 6. But notice, Pastor said, while they reject Psalm 19:1 through 3, which has to be included in the context of that, because all of these verses make a statement which would be incomplete if any of these verses were left out. The one thing we definitely know, Pastor says, is that Yahweh's Tekufa, his sacred year, which is based on a lunar cycle, it is only the astrologers and the astronomers and certain deceived assemblies who would try to tell you that the Tekufa was scripturally a solstice or an equinox. So let's take a look at Psalm 119, or Psalm 19, verse 6, scripturally. But Pastor's going to take it one step further. We're going to go through a lot more than just that one verse there. But it says Psalm 19, 1 through 6 has been mistranslated in the King James Version, as well as being grossly mistranslated by the astrologers. In Psalm 19:4, it shows there, it says that their line has gone throughout the earth, and their words to the end of the world, and in them he has set a tabernacle for the sun. Well, the word tabernacle and sun have been misunderstood, and so they've been mistranslated. Remember the lying pen of the scribes. And remember what the pattern behind it was, that there was a conspiracy that they're trying to separate, they're trying to cut Yahweh completely out of the picture by setting the feast days according to their sun gods, according to the solstices. But the word tabernacle in Hebrew is word ol from ahal, and it means either tabernacle or house, as Gesenius Hebrew and Chaldee lexicon of the Old Testament scripture shows. And then you see down there under number 2 there under where it says house or a habitation of any kind. And then Pastor shows here, it says Psalm 19:4, however, is a prophecy. It's a prophecy that speaks of Yahweh sending his message by witnesses to all the world. The word sun in Psalm 19:4 is word number 8121 in Strong's Hebrew Dictionary, but should have been translated light, which is a metaphor, which is a figure of speech, which makes implied comparison between things that are not literally alike. And you can see here that Julius First, the Hebrew and Chaldee lexicon to the Old Testament, by Julius First, it shows here that this word to be bright, this word light means of the light. It means to be shining. It means to be strong or powerful. Metaphor, to be shining. So of course, in Psalm 19:6, the word tekufa, which is translated circuit, should have been translated feast circuit. And Psalm 19:6 describes the authority of Yahweh, including the authority of his ordained feast, which reaches all places of the universe. Okay, it reaches everywhere. And Psalm 19:4, when properly translated, reveals the prophecy that the house of Yahweh is the ordained pillar and ground of Yahweh's truth, Yahweh's light in this world. Psalm 19, 1 through 14 are displayed, which shows how they are written in the book of Yahweh, the Holy Scriptures, the translation of the house of Yahweh. And then in Psalm 19, let's take a look at this and we can see what's being taught here. Heaven's messenger Heaven's messenger proclaims the glory of Yahweh, and the expanse of the sky declares the works of his hands. Well, who is the messenger of Yahweh in these last days? Praise Yahweh. Yisrayl Hawkins proclaims the glory of Yahweh. What is the glory of Yahweh? The laws of Yahweh, his plan. Remember, the name of Yahweh. Yahweh's name is his glory, and his name is shown in Yahweh's 13 perfect righteous attributes are displayed in the name of Yahweh, which show his character, which is outlined again and shown throughout Yahweh's law. Day after day, notice verse 2, day after day speech is uttered, night after night knowledge is shown. Okay, you think about, in the context of this being a prophecy of the house of Yahweh, you think about the teachings of Pastor. Pastor, remember years ago, Pastor said that he could teach 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and that he wouldn't have to sleep, he wouldn't have to stop. Well, day after day, speech is uttered, night after night, knowledge is shown. It's being done now. You realize that? It's being done through the broadcast here locally with the radio station. It's being done globally through the satellite, through the internet, and it's being broadcast throughout the entire world. All nations, anybody that has access to the internet can get these teachings. Day after day, the speech is uttered. Night after night, knowledge is shown. This 24-hour teaching. There is no speech, no language where their words are not heard. Their witness goes out throughout all the earth. When was this capable? When was this able to be done? When were these words able to go out throughout the entire earth? It couldn't be until the last days, because the knowledge was increased. The technology has increased to allow that to take place. Right now, these classes are going out throughout the entire world. This couldn't be done in the time period before the last days. It certainly couldn't have been done in the days of Noah. It couldn't have been done in the days of Yahshua. It couldn't be done. It couldn't be done in the days of the apostles and the prophets. There's just no way. It couldn't be done. There was a limitation. But in the last days, when knowledge is increased, that limitation has been removed, and it can go out, and it is going out throughout the entire earth at this time. And 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Their witness goes out throughout all the earth, and their story to the ends of the world. And in this earth, he has set up a house for the light. Remember, the house of Yahweh was wiped out in 305 AY, and it ceased to exist as an established, organized religion. It was done. It was gone. It was wiped out, which is why it had to be reestablished. After 1900 years, it had to be reestablished in the last days. Isaiah 2:2 and Micaiah 4:1 show that it was reestablished in the last days. It had to be done. And so this also identifies this time period too. And then we see here, he comes forth like a bridegroom from his canopy, and he rejoices like a champion to run the race. Think about the running the race with endurance. Think about the things that were, that were spoken of this last Sabbath and in previous Sabbaths about running the race with endurance. His going forth from the ends of the heavens, and his feast circuit to Kufa to their ends, and no one is hidden from his wrath or his judgment. Notice in verse 7 here, the laws of Yahweh are perfect. We've got to take all this because it's all speaking of the same thing. The laws of Yahweh are perfect, and they will convert the whole person. We need to be wise in the ways of Yahweh. The wisdom of this world is foolishness to Yahweh. It means nothing. You can have a bachelor's degree. You can have all kinds of schooling. You can have a doctorate. You can have a master's. You can have 3 or 4 of these things. You can have all kinds of paper on the wall. It doesn't matter. Because the only source of knowledge, the only source of wisdom is in the laws of Yahweh. That's the only thing, man, that is going to turn this stuff around, to turn this world around. Be wise in the ways of Yahweh and be foolish in the ways of the world. It's foolishness that is out there. That's all it is. And mankind has had 6,000 years to try to prove that they can fix things, that they can live at peace, and they can achieve the same things that they can achieve the same things their way as in Yahweh's way. And the only thing that they've proven, men, is that they can't. They've proven that they can't, and they never will. But the laws of Yahweh are perfect, and they will convert the whole person, but we have to submit ourselves to them. If we fight against them in any way, if we fight against them, if we rebel against them, if we rebel against the authority that's placed over us, it's not to our benefit. Our conversion won't be complete. The testimony of Yahweh is sure, making the simple ones wise. The statutes of Yahweh are right, and they rejoice the heart. The commandments of Yahweh are pure, and they bring understanding to the eyes. There is no righteous body of law in this world. This world, I don't care how many law libraries you go to, I don't care how many governments you go to, there is no righteous law among the world. The only righteous law, the only fair law, the only justice in this world comes forth from the very laws that this world is rejecting at this time. But the reverence of Yahweh is clean. It endures forever. This reverence of Yahweh, being obedient to these laws, are going to endure forever. The world is passing away, and the things that are in the world are passing away. Just like it says there in 1 Yachanan, the 2nd chapter. The judgments of Yahweh are true and altogether righteous. They are more to be desired than fine gold, yes, even much more than fine gold. And they are sweeter than honey in the honeycomb. And moreover by them are your servants warned, and in keeping them there is great reward. In submitting ourselves to these laws, there's no harm that comes from being obedient to these laws. They bring harm to no one. They harm no one. They bring health. They bring peace. There's nothing else. The harm and the peace and the sickness and the disease and the sickness and the strife and all of these other things come from going outside of these laws. Who can understand his errors? Cleanse us of concealed and hidden iniquities. Also keep back your servants from presumptuous sins. From presumptuous sins, and do not let them rule over us. Then we shall be upright, and we shall be innocent of the great transgression. The presumptuous sins, the rebelliousness. When we rebel, that's a presumptuous sin. That is a great transgression. And that's what's being mentioned here. Keep back your servants from these things, and do not let them rule over us, and then we shall be upright. We can't have that rebellion within us. Let the words of our mouths and the meditation of our hearts be acceptable in your sight, O Yahweh, our rock and our Redeemer. Pastor writes here, he says, you are able to see for yourselves that there is no place in Psalm 19:6, neither in Exodus 34:22, 1 Samuel 1:20, nor in 2 Chronicles 24:23, that show that the sun or the solstice is the scriptural tekupha of Yahweh's feast circuit in his sacred year. Nor is there any scriptural truth to the lie of setting Yahweh's feast according to the season of the sun. Yahweh's sacred year is lunar. Yahweh's sacred year is lunar. Set according to the sun, set according to the new moon of green ears of barley in the spring, and Yahweh's people and only Yahweh's people will observe Yahweh's ordinance, Yahweh's way, because that's what marks the person of Yahweh. Is someone who will observe and do things Yahweh's way. That is the mark. That is the seal. Everyone who reverences the name of Yahweh departs from iniquity, departs from pushing aside these laws as the entire world does today. Other scriptural lies. In their attempt to justify the use of pagan sun worship to set their festivals, the deceived assemblies who teach what the Jewish astrologers and astronomers have taught taught them about the scriptural word tekufa or tekufot, will preach other scriptural untruths to you, and some of these lies are in Genesis chapter 1, verse 14. They will tell you that Genesis 1:14 shows that the sun and the moon determine the calendar, not the ripening barley. The barley ripens at that season because the sun has returned to this certain point. Just because the sun hits a certain spot in the sky, does that mean that all of a sudden everything's going to sprout up and start growing? I don't think so. Because remember, the temperature and the climate variations are what control and what dictate when certain grains or when everything sprouts, and everything sprouts in different conditions, and Yahweh brings those conditions about in His time. Yahweh is in complete control of those things, not the sun. If that were the case, then when the new moon, when the green ears were seen on the third day of the third Roman month, then guess what we would see on the third day of the third Roman month the following year? What would we see? You would see the green ears. Do they show up then? No. There's the flaw. You see the flaw in that? I mean, it's common sense when you look at it. But, this saying, common sense really isn't that common, I guess, especially in the world. It's not there. But you think about it, though. It says in Genesis 1:14, it says, their so-called proof about this false statement consists of these statements. And so there's some statements in here. We'll just kind of hit some of the highlights, I hope, here. It says, the meaning of the word season in this verse has been understood to meaning the 4 seasons of the year, spring, summer, fall, and winter. It says, according to Young's Analytical Concordance, moed is translated as seasons 13 times. However, it's translated as feast 6 times, 4 times appointed time 2 times, assembly 2 times, place of assembly 1 time, congregation 149 times, and miscellaneous rendering 6 times. We see that the word moed generally refers to the gathering of people, the meeting place itself, or else to the feast days or the times of the festivals. It's not surprising, then, that several versions of the Bible read in Genesis 1:14 that the sun and the moon are for determining the feast days as well as to mark the days and years and to give light to the earth. Some of these versions are quoted below. And Pastor writes something here, and he says, first, I would like to ask you this question. Where is this assembly's proof that the word moed means sun? They said it. Just because they said it, that doesn't make it so, right? Believe me, they have many words, but they have nothing to say. On pages 24 to 26 of this book, and Pastor's going back and rehearsing and showing where we've already covered these things in the book. Okay? He says, on pages 24 to 26 of this book, we've proven beyond any doubt that Yahweh established the moon to set His feasts. In Psalm 104:19, Yahweh specifically said, let the moon is for moed, moadia, that is seasons. Then on pages 32 to 42 of the book, we've also proven that the sun worship was established by the Babylonians, in which the apostate Jews have brought down to the Christian and the Jewish world. And then on page 66, we've proven that the coming of spring time is definitely variable, unlike the sun's rising and setting and the equinoxes and solstices, which never change. Okay, so Pastor is going through, and he, as he often does, he will take what they show, what the world teaches, and what they use in an attempt to deceive, and starts pointing out scriptural point by point by point where they are incorrect. Okay? And that, men, is proving all things, because Pastor puts right in there on page such and such, on page I don't know, I don't have anything offhand here. Julia in the Analytical and Hebrew and Chaldee Lexicon to the Old Testament by Julius First. He's got the photograph. He's got the photocopy right there. And it's throughout the publications. Any of the booklets that are over there, you see. Painstaking time has gone through to show and to prove those very things. So all we have to do is study. Is to study and to go through. Do you know how long, man, it would take us to go through ourselves and to try to read these things? and to try to search these things out and study these things, it would take forever. And you know what? Pastor is led, guided, and directed by Yahshua. And he has been led, guided, and directed from the very beginning, ever since he began his study throughout his life. And because there is no way you think about when these books were written, I've said this before, and I just want to reiterate it again. When these books were written, there was no such thing as internet. There was no such thing as Google. You could not go to Google and Google, okay, let me find out all the everything on the winter solstice. You had to do that by hand. You had to go to a library, go to a card catalog, and you had to go through and flip page by page. Okay, yeah, that one might have something. That one might have something. Oh boy, here's this one here. Then you had to go walk through the library and find the book on the shelf. Okay? Book might be this thick, book might be that thick. Then you had to pull the book down. Now you had to go through the book and read and find the information. So with all of this information here, with the way, all of this, with the way that this is all put together, should leave no doubt in anybody's mind that Yahweh is not leading and guiding our pastor with this information. There's no other explanation for this as to how this man was able to do what he did. And he did it, and he put it in a book, and he compiled it for us, and it's simple for us to pick up the book, and all we have to do is read it and study it. That's all we have to do. He's done the work for us. But we have to do our part. We have to do our part, and we have to study to show ourselves approved. Okay? So, we'll stop here. I don't know what page it is on the old book. On the new book, it's on page 176, where it talks about Noah and the flood, and I love that section. I would have loved to have gotten to that tonight. But again, it's one of those common sense things, that people don't think about in the way that Noah set, in the way that they said that Noah set the feast. If anybody's ever been on a boat, they know it's not a steady platform, and I'll leave it at that for the next great Khan to speak. So with that, may Yahweh be with you and bless you.